Compass Mining is your trusted partner in Bitcoin mining. Whether you're investing in one machine or thousands, our customizable solutions are tailored to meet your needs. We are your experts in Bitcoin mining, offering a platform where individuals and businesses can purchase hardware, host machines, and access a range of ancillary Bitcoin mining services. We also specialize in large-scale site development and data center operations. Discover more at compassmining.io and see how we can power your success today. Hey miners, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, the official home of power mining analysis. Well, the Bitcoin miners have pulled back dramatically, really in response to yesterday's Fed meeting and rate cut. They're continuing that trend today, red across the board, sparking the question, has the Bitcoin miner rally been canceled? That's the topic we're going to be talking about in today's video. Before we get into it, take a second, smash the like button, you guys. Big help to myself and the channel. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join and let us know in the comment section below how you're feeling about your portfolio, if you're adding to any of your positions, and your outlook on the Bitcoin mining sector as we move into 2025. Now, with that being said, let's get into today's video. Okay, guys, so that's right. Thursday morning, red across the markets. Bitcoin dropping below $100,000. Anthony, we're going to come on to that in a second, but the miners have pulled back in a big way. Really, since we released yesterday's video, started to sell off into the Fed meeting and continued to go deeper into the red throughout trading yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm slightly, I'm a bit more ahead of you in time zone. So I'm in Turkey this week, and so I'm 10 hours ahead of you. So yeah, it was a little bit of a shock when I woke up this morning, saw the miners had been literally beaten up yesterday, and the Bitcoin price had dropped to about 102,000, and then during the day here today, it's gone down again. So down under 100,000 again, but bear in mind a couple of weeks ago we hadn't reached 100,000. So this is Bitcoin land, and you have to get used to these days where it's a little bit of volatility. Small percentages, but the mining stocks are pretty much in the red today as well, following that downward trend from Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's interesting, Anthony. We talked about this $100,000 psychological sell wall breaking through this to the upside. Now it's really become a big support level for Bitcoin and obviously for the miners. It'll be interesting to see how this fares today. We've also received a lot of comments recently. Every time we put a video out, it seems the miners go down if we're talking about a rally. So it'll be interesting today to see how they respond to this video and trading into next week. Now, you talk about Bitcoin price, Anthony. We've talked about the volatility a lot on this channel over the past year. Does this concern you at all? Are you feeling like this potential rally could be canceled or upended, or is this just regular volatility along the way?
This is regular volatility. There's nothing in the market at the moment that suggests anything other than, the fact that, there are a number of people that like to trade Bitcoin. And so, there are longs and shorts in play out there, and that certainly has an impact. But in terms of all the news out there, it's still positive. I mean, the ETFs are still buying Bitcoin. The public miners, again this week, still buying Bitcoin, and we'll come on to a few of those that have bought Bitcoin. Michael Saylor still buying Bitcoin. He's at 439,000. Not sold any yet, I don't believe. If we hear some bad news, that obviously impacts it, but there's been no real bad news. It might be, some people have took some profits. I mean, it did go from, 70 to 108,000 in very, very short space of time since the election. Election was in November, literally just over a month ago. And it's rallied, the best part 40% in that period of time. So maybe some people have took profits. I haven't sold any. You've not sold any. Michael Saylor hasn't sold any. So that's three of us. There we go.
I was actually buying some yesterday as well. Any time you can get Bitcoin under $100,000, I think we're going to look back and wish we had more of these days. Now, it's interesting you bring up the ETF flows as well. We haven't brought up a HODL 15 chart in a while, so we'll bring this one up, Anthony. Green across the board. You're not seeing any red on this chart here. Hundreds of millions of dollars flowing into the Bitcoin ETFs. day after day after day. So again, you guys, it's easy to get caught in the downward volatility here with the miners. But if you zoom out, you take a step backwards, Anthony, the amount of money, the amount of inertia that Bitcoin has right now, they say an object in motion remains in motion. This is a global phenomenon right now, and I don't think there's any slowing this down in the near future.
No, it's relentless, and like HODL 15's, put in his post there, that's 15 consecutive days for inflows into the Bitcoin ETFs. Yes, there are occasionally red days, but they're few and far between. The percentage of red days is very small in comparison, and we know that. Like I just articulated from the election day, that the Bitcoin price has only gone one way there, and therefore to help it get there, the ETFs have been buying, and other companies outside of the ETFs have also been buying. So, but there's some big days there, in terms of the fact that about $45 million of Bitcoin is mined a day. Every day in the last 15 has had in excess of, at least 2.5 days of production. And in some instances, you're up to 12, 13, 14 days of production purchased in one day by the ETFs. And this is only a small fraction of the market. I mean, the ETFs now, if you look at what they hold as a total, it's around about 4% of the whole market. So it's a lot of Bitcoin. It's still a sort of small percent. There's still another 96% of held Bitcoin out there. But yeah, this is fairly relentless what they're doing here, and this is why I'm not overly concerned. If we saw 7 or 8 red days in that period, that might be a little bit of a concern as to why the ETF's selling, because that would mean that people are removing their investment from the ETFs, and therefore the ETFs have to sell, because the ETFs are a Bitcoin-backed investment. So as people put money into the ETFs, they use that money to purchase Bitcoin, so it can actually back the fund that's in there, and the reverse of that happens if money's taken out. I just expect the ETFs just to get stronger and stronger as more people start realizing this is a great way to invest, and looking at the price of the ETFs from where they were back at the start of the year when they were approved to where they are now, that will give an indication that the returns are far outperforming likes of the S&P this year.
Yeah, it'll be great to see as these full year and Q4 earnings come out, probably closer to February, Anthony, really supporting the sector. Now, you mentioned $45 million a day in production. I just wanted to put an asterisk on that. That's assuming all of the miners sell their production, and we know most of the miners right now are hodling. So even extenuates that example that you said there, Anthony. We talked about the Fed meeting last night. They cut rates by 0.25%. Now, this is generally seen as monetary easing, Anthony, more money coming into the system, which is generally good for Bitcoin. So a little bit of a surprise to me that Bitcoin took such a nosedive as we see this quantitative easing coming into the market and the money printers starting up again. So again, we think this is short-term volatility. We think this is a good buying opportunity. Time will tell. It'll be interesting to see those ETF in or outflows for the back half of this week. Now, if we jump into the mid-morning miner update, Anthony, I believe Gryphon was the only one in green this morning. Miners continuing to pull back red across the board, but definitely some great bargains if you've been waiting, maybe with some cash on the sideline.
Yeah, I noticed Gryphon was up considerably early morning. But bear in mind, when you think of if you look at Gryphon's 52-week high of $10.30 and their low of 38 cents, it has dramatically come down over this last 12-month period. And so, this isn't probably a little bit of respite here for shareholders, but they've had some positive news of recent weeks to support this increase. They've announced, the fact they've got this 100 megawatts now of energy, really, low priced energy with the potential to extend that to 1 gigawatt. They've brought in new leadership. They've added to the board of directors as well. So they're doing things in a way that, that will hopefully bring some more recognition from the markets. And we want to see some of the smaller miners grow. We've said before that there seems to be a bit of a gap. There's those that are sort of $1 billion market cap and above, and there's a few miners below that. And the challenge is to get to that $1 billion market cap, because if you can't raise capital, substantial amounts of capital, it means that you're going to struggle going through. And that was reiterated by Zach Bradford this week when he talked about, the 650 million convertible note they've just raised. If you think about the companies that have raised notes in the last sort of 6 months, they're all sort of like the fairly big miners. They've been able to go into the market and raise substantial amounts. And then you look at miners who've raised small amounts because obviously they're smaller miners, and look at the likes of, say, Argo, who raised, or diluted some shares, raised small amounts of capital, but the impact it had on the share price, is it's challenging. We've seen some miners break through this year and done really well. So we've seen Bitdeer come from, their share price was, was at $5.23 at a low in the last 12 months. It's been as high as $25.51 in the last week or so, when it reached an all-time high there. Current valued at $3.2 billion. I mean, Bitdeer was less than $1 billion. At the start of this year. So they've managed to come through there. And as you get bigger and grow in size, it becomes that little bit more easier to raise more capital, because you've got that head start and the market. You've got a value book play there that you can sell to the market. And at the moment we've got about 8 or 9 miners, and most of them are over 2 billion now. So before it was like just creeping over 1 billion to get into that club, and all of a sudden we've got quite a few miners now well over 2 billion, and that seems to be the magic number to get there. The ones that are in that group just behind the billion is going to be the likes of Bit Digital, and the likes of Hive Digital as well. So those two. Bit Digital around about the 550 million mark, and Hive about the 450 million mark. So it's how do those two companies sort of like break out and get into that next level. I mean, we know Hive have managed to increase, or their strategy to increase to 15 exahash by probably about this time next year, by operating in Paraguay. They've already broke ground there, so that's well on the way there. I know the team are going down, the senior team are going down in January to see the progress of the site there. We'll start getting updates probably mid quarter 2 as they start energizing some of the buildings. So it won't be all the buildings energized at the end of the year. It'll be starting to energize from probably quarter 2 onwards. Bit Digital, on the other hand, not as focused on the Bitcoin mining, but doing really well on the HPC side. And, they've got well over 50 million of annualized income coming in at the moment, and they're signing contracts left, right, and center. They've got their own HPC facility, which they recently purchased. That's doing really well. They've got a client that wants to double their revenues to 100 million. And there's still on discussions there about whether it will be the H200 or the H100 miner. So we'll hopefully get Sam to give us an update as to when that gets signed off. But he did have a plan to reach 100 by the end of the year, and we've got about just over 10 days left of that. Be interested to see what their update is in early January. And see if they give any bits of information about whether that's going to be increased. But they've got a solid order book there, and we know the market's not giving them enough credibility for their HPC because it's very, very profitable. They've leased some of the buildings, they've leased the machines, they've got a reasonably good energy contract, so it's all about margins for them, and they make a considerable margin on the HPC. And as Sam says, Bitcoin price will have to rally to about 135,000 before he started looking in the Bitcoin mining direction again.
Most definitely. Well, it's well on its way. Now, you bring up the fact that there's only a couple weeks left in the calendar year. We were also talking with Sebastian yesterday many of us in the Bitcoin mining community expected CIFR, TeraWulf, some of these other players to have an HPC announcement by year end. Do you think we will see any other big announcements in calendar 2024? Compass Mining makes Bitcoin mining accessible to everyone. Start mining in as little as 48 hours with our turnkey hardware, online and mining directly to your Bitcoin wallet within 2 business days. Find out more at compassmining.io and get started now.
Well, I'm surprised that Hut haven't confirmed what's happening. It's been released on social media about the project it appears they're part of. They've been named in the project. The client's been named as well. The county's released information, so just waiting for H to release it themselves. So I don't know what's going on with the communication team there, but that looks like it's a done deal. And to be honest with you, when we had Sue on the podcast recently. And we know that Asher has also spoken to the market and indicated 430 megawatts is a done deal, all bar giving the name of the client. It sounds like it's the cat's out the bag. So let's hope that they can rally and get together and put that update out there. But they did manage to put out an update out today.
They certainly did. Now, before we get into some of these HODL updates and buying, another interesting chart here showing the top 60 companies that have Bitcoin HODL on their balance sheet. I went through this list last time they put it out, Anthony. I think we've interviewed 21 of the 60 or somewhere in that neighborhood. So I just wanted to shout that out. This is a great list, you guys, if you're looking to do some due diligence or pick up some tickers to watch. These are the Bitcoin related companies. And with that being said, Anthony, you're exactly right. Hut 8 and Marathon coming out with some big updates on their HODL.
Yeah, absolutely. So we heard from Hut 8 earlier today. They've just gone and spent 100 million on buying Bitcoin, and they've purchased 990 Bitcoin at an average price of just over 101,710. And bear in mind, this is a company that had 9,220 at the end of November, so they've had a really good HODL. They've had a HODL of over 9,000 for a considerable amount of time. They didn't really sell any through the bear cycle. They remained that HODL there, and I remember before the merger speaking to Sue and Jamie and saying, when are you going to sell some Bitcoin? And they're saying when it gets to 500,000, and it looked like they were holding on for them. But I know this year they have been selling some of their production, but they've not been selling any of the HODL effectively. So they've just been increasing their HODL slightly. But this is an interesting position here. They look like they now realise, or they're following the sort of Michael Saylor strategy to utilise, some of their cash that they've managed to receive from the debt markets to pay for this. And if you think about, what their new total HODL now, it's well over 10,096 Bitcoin, and that's going to market value at today's price of over $1 billion. So that's an amazing position to be in there. That 1 billion also gives them opportunities in so many ways because they can leverage that 1 billion to do certain things. So it's having that HODL is good when the Bitcoin price is really high, and we hope obviously it continues to rise. One other good thing about Hut 8 is the fact that with that low cost power they've got, and they're managing to achieve power under 3 cents a kilowatt hour. So we talk about the mining companies, not many of them can get under 3 cents. We know the likes of CIFR are averaging about 2.7. IREN have been averaging just under 3 cents the last couple of months at their Childress site. Maybe Soluna in some of their facilities as well have been averaging around about 3 cents. So, Huts is a really low rate there. And, with that low rate, and the fact they're going to be hopefully bringing in a lot more efficient machines, giving them a realized cost of about $24,485. So we heard from CleanSpark this week that I think their average cost is about 36,250. Anything under the sort of 50,000 mark in terms of cost of producing a Bitcoin is going to be in good position, because if the Bitcoin price is 100,000, that means you've got a nice margin of well over 50,000. But in this case here, an even bigger margin. So Yeah, that when we thought some of these miners would struggle post the halving, we've seen the miners do exactly what we expected some of them to do, and that's to find the cheap energy, get the most efficient mining machines, and produce Bitcoin at a really low price.
Exactly. And really, the only number that matters is hash price. It's funny to look at their account balances, look at the comments on the videos. People are so reactive on day to day trades. But think about Asher and Sue and some of these people that have $1 billion in Bitcoin. They're not worried if it goes up or down on a day to day basis. They see the long term trend here. Obviously, Marathon leading the pack as well with that purchase strategy and coming out with another big purchase, Anthony. Looks like they're trying to stay within that 10% of MicroStrategy ballpark, hey?
Absolutely. They seem to have been using that as a benchmark. They've now announced that they raised, just under 2 billion, 1.925 billion from the convertible notes in November and December. So over the last month, raised just under 2 billion and using that proceeds to purchase 15,574 Bitcoin. And in their HODL today, they are fast approaching 45,000. So 44,394 Bitcoin on the balance sheet. That's, getting up for $4.5 billion just in Bitcoin on the balance sheet, even at today's price of just over 100,000.
Incredible. I saw an interesting note yesterday saying there are now under 1 million addresses with a whole Bitcoin associated with them. So you think about some of these corporations going out there, Anthony, buying 40,000 Bitcoin. There's really a case to be said. I don't know how many people are going to be able to acquire a full Bitcoin looking out 5, 10, 15 years. There's just not enough of it to go around. And these corporations are taking more than their fair share. As you said earlier, the ETFs acquiring 4% of the entire Bitcoin balance or network that there will ever be. So very interesting supply demand dynamics here, Anthony. Marathon continuing to push the envelope in terms of the miners. We got another piece of news last night. DMG came out with their Q4 and full year earnings. Now we've reached out to Sheldon and Steve for an interview, so we won't go through in detail here, Anthony, but I looked through the highlight numbers and again, looks to be a strong year for DMG, moving in the right direction.
Obviously, Canadian miners, so these are in Canadian dollars. I haven't converted them yet because I was hoping we'd get Sheldon and Steve on the podcast and go through them in a bit more detail. But in terms of this is full year, in terms of revenue, just under $34 million. So that's an increase of 6 million on the previous year. In terms of expenses, 48 million, just over $48 million, which is just under $2 million higher than the previous year. If you look at what they did make a net loss just over 5 million Canadian dollars. But for some of these Canadian miners must be using the IFRS reasons. If you look at the revaluation gain, which goes below the line, they had a revaluation gain on their digital assets of 10 million. They actually achieved a net income of about $5 million. But for accounting purposes, they'll show a net loss, and it's about 3 cents a share. The other interesting thing is regards to their balance sheet. So we know if you look at and a lot of the analysis I do, when you include the likes of DMG and Hive, and we look at some of the smaller miners, they are significantly undervalued in terms of their valuation for a hash rate compared to some of the larger peer miners. For a company of this size here with just 1.66 exahash, they've got shareholder equity on the balance sheet of 85 million Canadian dollars. And so, if you look at that and compare that to some of the other miners, that's a low amount there. That would be 50 million Canadian dollars per exahash, and then change that into US dollars. That probably takes it down to under 40 million per exahash there. And when we look at some of the peer miners there, we always use this benchmark of about 100 million per exahash. I think even the likes of Marathon and CleanSpark around about 100 million per exahash. So when you look at DMG, and are operating, significantly less than that. And if you look at enterprise value and then start, realizing that, they've got a HODL, they've got cash on the balance sheet there. They've got some debt, which is mostly in their current liabilities, which means that most of the debt will be cleared in the next 12 months. In terms of long-term debt, 51,000 Canadian dollars. So it's not a lot of long-term debt to worry about. But they have got some loans that will be repaid back in the next 12 months because they're in their current liabilities. We know that current liabilities are 12 months of positions there, and current assets are also over 12 months. Anything over longer than those periods go into long-term assets or long-term liabilities.
Yeah, makes sense. The other thing I thought maybe you could clarify, Anthony. So in Canada, IFRS, you talk about below the line versus above the line for FASB accounting. Can you just refresh viewers on the differences there? What do you mean below, above the line as it relates to the fair value accounting of this Bitcoin?
Well, we know with GAAP accounting, the FASB rules has now allowed mining companies to put in a true value of the Bitcoin. So as the Bitcoin price changes, they can account for that change. Whereas before, they could only account for the change when it went lower. So you could never account for it if it increased. If it kept dropping, you had to then keep accounting for the Bitcoin prices as it got lower and record that. Now, a lot of these mining companies, most of the US mining companies fall into this bracket, and we'll see this in when we see their next updates, which will be for some miners, it'll be the full year earnings reports, and for some miners, it could be like a Q1 or a Q2 because a lot of miners operate different
Yep.
calendar years in terms of their accounts. But FASB allows you to use the market value for Bitcoin. And so when it comes to the end of that quarterly period, they can use the value of Bitcoin at that point in time. And if they've got significant HODL, it's a real benefit. Equally, if the Bitcoin price drops from the previous quarter, they have to show that unrealized loss as well. The fact they've not sold any Bitcoin, you show unrealized gains and unrealized losses on the balance sheet. Now, with the likes of DMG, and I know that Hive Digital also in their accounts, they show this change in valuation below the line. So they do put it in there. So it does get recorded. But when the company, will show their physical performance, they'll show that the line that, and it doesn't include this actual number, but they show
Gotcha.
it for comparative references. So, but in terms of the year, I mean, only a 5% loss when you think about, we've had a halving, Bitcoin price, was at 42,000 at the start of the year. And and if you remember, we've got all those podcasts we're doing where the hash price is around 40. These accounts are up to the end of September. So these aren't the last 3 months where we've seen the Bitcoin price really, really rally. These accounts will be done where the Bitcoin price is around 50, 60,000 for most of that period. And so when DMG release their first quarter, which will be probably in January, towards the end of January, for this last 3 months, you'll see a significant difference because, they've all benefited from the fact Bitcoin price was heading up towards 100,000 for most of the period. So it'll really benefit from that there. So I don't think it's the numbers there are too bad at all. Bear in mind, we saw, some big losses from some of the big miners. There was only one miner that came out with a actual profit for the last quarter, and that was Hut 8. I think Sheldon and the team there, they obviously manage costs really well. They've grown organically. They've got a target of 3 exahash for the end of 2025. So at 1.66 at the moment, it looks like they're going to have to nearly double that there, but they do have some machines to get them to 2 exahash coming in imminently. So they should be at 2 maybe by the end of January, and then they want to increase another exahash during the year there. So they set the marker in the stone as what they want to do. They've got so many other things going on in terms of their core software program, and they've also their own mining pool. And Sheldon has, 10 or 12 different ideas coming out every time we speak to him on a podcast. So we can't wait to get him on there and find out what's been keeping him awake at night as we go through to the next round.
Yeah, great points. Looking really forward to these next round of earnings, regardless of which quarter it is for the company. Should be great, Anthony. So we've got a big quarter expected on the horizon. We've got the Fed cutting interest rates and easing their monetary policy, and we're getting an opportunity to pick up the miners on sale. So it's a good day in the power mining analysis world. The other thing we've got on the go, Anthony, is our Miner Madness 2.0 competition. So details were put out earlier in the week. You're able to sign up either on our PMA Twitter account or on the video that was put out earlier in the week, Miner Madness 2.0. It's a yellow thumbnail, so go take a look at that. Already receiving a ton of entries, hoping to get 1,000 contestants in this one, but a ton of fun heading into 2025.
Yeah, no, it's been great. And Rex has put his choices in there, which is good to see. And a few other additional analysts will be added to the lists. I've also seen Mike, who's a regular contributor on Spaces. We'll get him in the analyst list there because he talks a lot about mining companies, so he would have a good insight there. Interesting picks from Mike actually. I was actually looking at his three there, not the three I would have chosen myself, but maybe he knows something I don't. But he's gone for some really some of the smaller miners we maybe have bigger potential. Who knows? I mean, to be honest with you, not many people had Hut and Bitdeer in their choices. And a lot of people wish they had it done now because those two miners really did well over the period. And nobody had Canaan. And Canaan are a Bitcoin miner. Yes, they do produce mining machines, but they also have a significant amount of hash rate as well. And they've been using that this year, and so their share price, when in the last week or so, had rallied as high as 200% since the start of the competition. So that was performing as well as Bitdeer. So really, got to do your due diligence and make sure you're thinking about what's going to happen in that first quarter, who's going to release information about, maybe some potential contracts coming up. Is Soluna's had a bit of a rough time over the last few weeks there. Are they one of the ones that could actually turn? Their share price was well over $8 midway through this year. It's hovering, probably about $2.50 today. So that maybe has a lot of potential to get back to that year high there. So that may be worth looking at there. Or will people start to think, what? My favorites, like I think the most popular ones were IREN, CleanSpark, and Bitfarms from memory. So it's going to be interesting. But yeah, we've had a lot of interest. A lot of people have put theirs in straight away. I was thinking people might hold off a week or so and then start picking, but they've gone with their guts, and they're all putting in the Bitcoin price as well, which is really helpful because that means they've fulfilled the criteria to enter the competition.
Yeah, most definitely. I'm going to go with your strategy, Anthony. I'll submit my picks on the final day, give myself the best opportunity as possible. But yeah, some people going with their gut feeling, shooting from the hip here. So a great competition. We're looking extremely forward to 2025. We may even have a couple new miners joining the analysis. So it should be a great year. Tremendous growth for the platform in 2024, and we look to continue that next year. So you guys, we've covered a lot today. Let us know in the comment section, how are you feeling about this pullback? Did you manage to average into any of your positions or top up with any spare change? And your outlook in terms of Bitcoin price for the final few days of 2024 here. So thanks so much for watching. Hit the like button. Feel free to subscribe. We'll see you back here tomorrow.